Before we begin, the title is written in the right-hand corner of the screen. Enjoy watching.
Fandon's Manor. This huge mansion is owned by a family that doesn't just love art. It's their life. Because of this, there are some problems. For example, their daughter has been complaining to the assistant since the morning that it's too much. The parents are obsessed with art. She used to be able to put up with it, but now it's getting out of hand. So much so that it's hard to tell if you're in someone's home or at a show. If this keeps up, all the Fandons will be on the street. She says the aide hasn't been here that long and must not have heard that a wave of art collecting started in Bueno a few years ago. Suddenly, the young lady's mom walks in, and in just a second she was right beside her. She ran at the speed of sound. Molly loves her mom very much, and as soon as she sees her, she doesn't miss an opportunity and tries to talk about something, because she is always at work and is almost never free. The woman praised the helper for a good job and thanked her for the class. That helper works here as a teacher, and her name is Loidus. She is very good at her duties. In a short time, the girl has learned her manners. She has started to behave much more calmly and not at all like she used to. Just a few weeks ago, she was a very difficult child and almost unmanageable. Since everyone was free for the time being, the woman suggested that we all have a cup of tea together. They had just been given a lot of sweets this morning, and it was a great excuse to taste a lot of things. The teacher couldn't refuse. Besides, she didn't have time for breakfast this morning. On the way, they started to talk about the past teacher, who suddenly left. But in any case, the woman is very grateful to fate that she found Loideus, because with her, her daughter changed very quickly for the better. For a moment, the mistress was curious to know where the girl had come to them from, and what had made her come away from her home, where there were so many more possibilities. Loideus didn't even have time to answer the first question before the lady asked the second, where she had been working all this time, because from the looks of it, she had experience for sure. At first, the girl didn't want to talk about it. You can see how painful it is for her. But it's strange that the woman doesn't notice it. She was distracted just in time by another assistant. The teacher exhaled a little. It seemed like a gift from the universe. She wasn't ready for this conversation. It was easier to keep silent than to talk about her past. At one point, the assistant started talking very quietly to the lady, and as soon as the woman knew something, she immediately apologized and had to reschedule the tea party for another time. She explained that some very important guest had arrived, whom it was urgent to meet, and it was undesirable to keep him waiting a minute. As a change, on the way she promised to bring some sweetmeats and never heard the Loides refuse and say it wasn't necessary to do so. Besides, it's time for her to go home, and since the tea party is postponed, there's no point in staying for a few hours. Better to spend that time relaxing at home. As soon as there was no one left around, the girl looked at this huge painting, and it turns out that all this time she had purposely not looked at it so as not to arouse the slightest bit of suspicion. It's very interesting what she's hiding. Her view of this masterpiece is so special that perhaps her past could be linked to something like this. Every time she walks past any painting that comes her way, the same thought keeps running through her mind. What kind of life is it where one can afford to own a work of art? She had thought about it, but she had dismissed it because they lived in different worlds anyway. But it wasn't clear who they were talking about and what it meant. But if you look at it from the outside, she was always sad about something. Maybe that's why she didn't want to tell anyone too much about herself. Actually, all this speculation has a place. She has a lot of secrets that no one should know about, at least not until she's dead. Suddenly, some guy comes up to her. He looks very much like the one in the huge painting. Ledius recognized him immediately and of course said hello. It's no wonder he has a lot of portraits of himself. With looks like that, it would be strange if there was none of that. And then there's this painting of Lydius, in a style that is one of the reasons why it's such a mystery. No one can ever know what she was doing before and what's left afterwards. The guy and girl exchanged glances. It was somehow special, but at first she didn't even pay attention to it. The guy was so puzzled, like he was trying to remember something. Her face seemed too familiar to him. If this is the guest Mrs. Fendens was talking about, one of the assistants runs up to them, and suddenly it all makes sense. A famous billionaire who was into collecting and more. This man had an uncommunicative and shrewd character, and it is said he never showed himself in public, as if he were terribly afraid of it. This man, the Marquis of Tyrant, though he cannot be met in public places, his face and in general his personality are very well known to all. At that moment, the girl felt as if this meeting would end up being something special, something she definitely couldn't have expected. He asks who she is because she didn't introduce herself earlier, even though it disgusts him. And most of the time, not necessarily. It wouldn't hurt her to introduce herself. The thing is, they weren't supposed to see each other at all. It all happened by mistake. The butler accidentally brought the guest to the wrong place and is very much changed for it. The guy replied that it's okay and there's nothing wrong with it. But for now, he wants to hear the answer to his question. He's too curious to know who's standing in front of him, further proving the possibility that maybe this art lover might have seen her somewhere. If it were not so, the girl would not be embarrassed and immediately said her name and surname, but she is very scared to do it. Especially the situation is very strange. The girl tried to keep her story as brief as possible, namely that she works as a teacher in this family and has nothing much more to say about herself. It feels as if her fate may be decided after this conversation. I wonder if he will remember her or not, and if so, how exactly. At the very last moment, when she's already relaxed and sees that he's thinking too much, the guy says he's remembered everything and she can say nothing more. She was the eldest daughter in an ordinary middle-class family. Her parents were artisans, but the beautiful life in their love and care did not last long. As it happened, their parents were killed in an accident on the road, a terrible tragedy that turned the girls' lives and destiny completely different from what they had imagined for their future. In the end, it was just the two of them, her ailing sister, who needed to pay for her medication every day, constantly feeling guilty and apologizing that Lydius had to take care of her. The older sister could not do anything. She only thought about where to get the money. Even if she found a job, it would be enough only for food. Medicines were something unattainable for them at that time. They cost as much as they could not earn even for half a year. In the end, the girl did not think of anything better than to become a model for one artist. The difficulty and doubts consisted in the fact that it was necessary to pose almost without clothes, and so every day from morning till evening. She had to choose such a job. Only there they paid as much as would be enough for medicine. The artist constantly did not like something. She did not so straighten her back, not so turned around and offers nothing. In general, he was never completely satisfied with her. But even for that, Lydius was insanely grateful. It cost him nothing to find a new model. But by some miracle, he didn't kick her out and finish the pictures until the end. She was saved by her unique appearance, which he had been looking for many years. And if you quarrel, it would hardly be possible to find someone similar. Besides, the girl was obedient, although there were many remarks. In the end, everything turned out very beautifully. The thing is that all her life, the girl was very modest and always worried about people thinking well of her. Accordingly, she didn't really want anyone to recognize her from the picture. Sometimes she asked to draw so that the face was not visible, but in some cases the face was a requirement. Back then, she was in no position to point and resist. She was making money and was willing to do almost anything. And meanwhile, there were thoughts of what would happen if suddenly the Fandon's family fired her because of today's incident. Her sister's medical bills are not yet paid. The debt is still there. If the girl had known that after the death of her parents, her life would be hell, she would not have let them leave the house even just to walk in the yard. There was one situation where the artist got tired of adjusting to her and asked for permission so he could paint her face exactly as she looked in real life and not have to make anything up. The emotions and fears she felt at that moment cannot be conveyed in words. She had images and voices of people spreading gossip and condemning her for such a job. When this man first offered to cooperate, he said he would only paint her back, and in the course of the work, and she already made concessions when she allowed a little extra painting of her face, just to make it different from what it really is. It turns out, it is very simple. Artists get much more money in the case if the paintings depict a face. Without it, the value of his work will be much lower, so he so persistently and often persuaded her to do it. Accordingly, she would also get a lot more than usual. It would be beneficial for each of them. But she could not agree. It seemed impossible to overcome that fear, so she had to endure a little indignation. It was as if the man didn't realize that the problem wasn't just that she just didn't want to do it. It was more serious than that. She wasn't someone who didn't care about her reputation. She must preserve the honor and dignity of her family. And so far, nothing can make her do that and accept such a tempting offer. I'm surprised the man listened to her and didn't do the opposite. He had the option to ignore her words and still draw the face, since he has a good visual memory. A few days later, the girl saw the finished painting and came to resent him. She asked him how he dared to do that to her. After all, she had asked him not to do it. But he denied his guilt and explained that he had done nothing wrong. You can't see her face there at all. He made concessions anyway. He only drew her hair and almost nothing else. It's not clear who the model was, and he doesn't understand what the problem is. From this picture, it was impossible to recognize who he was painting. He said it was too much. The girl was seeing something that wasn't even close to being there. What's more, he's already sold the painting, it's already got a new owner, and there's no way to redo it. After these words, she almost fainted. At the same time, she wanted to talk him out of it and buy back this painting. There would only be money. And then, she thought, to ruin this painting so much that the customer would turn out and not want to buy it. Then she felt betrayed by him. Although, in fact, the man really did everything as they had agreed. He fulfilled the customer's wish, and at the same time, the picture does not show the face, as the model had requested. Then she didn't understand how everything looked from the outside. She was afraid of even being recognized by her hair or her ear, which is very visible in the picture. If someone found out that the teacher was doing something like that, it would be a real shame for the rest of her life. She was already anticipating these words that she would have to hear from morning till night, how she is not ashamed, how she allows herself such things and everything else. It would only be a shame that those who would say such a thing have no idea what made her go to such an act. If she didn't have all these problems, there's no way the lady would pose for such pictures, knowing that someone would then look at her every day in her room. And then someone comes in. The person who came to pick up his order is the customer who wanted the face painting. The artist is very happy. He didn't have to guard the painting and fear that the girl would want revenge. At that moment, the girl decided to act very quickly and decisively. She opens the door and apologizes that there is no way he can get his order. She apologized and explained that it was impossible to sell the painting because it had been painted without the model's consent. The artist has already dreamed and wanted to give his work that he even offers to find a compromise and somehow negotiate. He really needs the money, and he is not going to say goodbye to the client. Luckily, they got very lucky, and instead of the customer himself came in his assistant, he had just said so and thought he couldn't interfere in his master's business, so he would just tell him about the situation. He's sitting in a carriage nearby. We'll have to wait a little longer, for it all depends on what the gentleman says. The girl decided not to think long. She looked out the window to see the man, as if she could tell from his appearance whether he would make concessions or not. If suddenly he orders to take this painting by any means, you can consider the reputation of the girl forever ruined. But here, it is unclear why she thinks about it, because the painting will be at this man's home, and not in some museum, where it will see the whole city. The assistant is taking a suspiciously long time to speak to the gentleman, which may mean that no matter how much the assistant tries to explain the situation, he is not making any concessions. Meanwhile, this guy came back. His owner said he was willing to listen to the reason why she couldn't allow the painting to be sold. The man got excited and said he'd be happy to explain everything and come over to his carriage. But the assistant apologized and explained that the man had misunderstood him. He's talking about the model. The gentleman is interested in hearing just her. After all, it's the girl versus the sale, not the artist. The gentleman is already waiting for her in his carriage, and it seems to be the same acquaintance after which he remembered her. Though if they had just given the picture away, it is unlikely that he would have seen anything at all and recognized her face. Even if she had stood opposite him all day long, it is simply impossible. She's got a lot of problems in her head, like she can see everything there, but she really doesn't. It remains to be seen if the girl is okay with this conversation. It turns out there is another problem. The fact that if the customer is tired of talking to them, he has every right to take away the painting. Since the money the artist has long since received, the assistant suggested the option that he can return the money and they will give up the painting. But according to the man, it is no longer possible. He spent every penny, and the model is not even surprised. She knows this man very well and understands perfectly well what he spent them on. Meanwhile, they had been talking so long and undecided that the owner was no longer able to wait. He had other things to do and plans to make. In order not to lose touch, and in case of anything the girl could contact them, he gave her an address where she could come in the morning, if she wanted, of course. So they left in their carriage, and the model was left alone with her thoughts. It's not clear why, but she thinks it's a huge shame and regrets having agreed to it at all. She doesn't want to see anyone, but at the same time, she realizes that a conversation with that person is inevitable. It would be better for her to just approach him at once, rather than to allocate a particular day for it and make something serious out of this conversation. She only has the address on a small piece of paper and will probably go to it first thing in the morning. The most important thing is that no one will understand her and no one will come to support her. Moreover, she has no one to tell about it. She doesn't want to upset her sister and she has no one else. Loidus got home early today. Her sister came down to her on the first floor and asked her how her day was, although today it would have been better if she hadn't even asked that today. The girl won't say anything anyway. He never talks to her about the bad stuff, and even when it happens, he makes it sound like everything is fine. They started cuddling as usual, thinking about what to make for dinner tonight. Even though there wasn't a lot of food, they were trying to be as frugal as possible. They even have rules that if, for example, someone is not very hungry after lunch, dinner can be skipped and the next meal will be at breakfast time. But this time, the girl did not hold back. Her sister saw her tears and realized that today was a very hard day. She did not even ask anything, because she knows she would not like to talk about it very much. The younger sister has no idea how much trouble the older sister is having now. She's got absolutely everything on her plate: work, cooking at home, medication, and everything else. Even when she just thinks about it, she feels very bad and doesn't want to see anyone. But unfortunately, there is no other choice. She has to make money any way she can. She must take the painting at any cost, even if it's impossible. The girl doesn't even think about what needs to be done. She just doesn't stop. She tries to find any way she can. They miss the opportunity to talk to someone, to ask some needed questions to find out some information or clue. This time, she went to the woman she's teaching, and at first it was scary. Then the feeling was gone. But suddenly, the thought came to her that she couldn't just take it now and break the trust she had built up all this time. So she just apologized and said that she wanted to praise her daughter. She was doing great today. The woman was very excited. It had been a long time since she had heard anything like that about her daughter, much less from a past teacher. In the end, nothing has changed in a few days. Nothing could not be thought of. The last option is to go to the guy and tell the truth. She doesn't even want to think about having to do it. She'd do anything to avoid going to him and solve the problem some other way. It took her half the day to come up with an idea, but to no avail. The more she thinks about it, the harder it is to calm down. The girl, as usual, is too much of a narcissist. Even though that picture doesn't even have her face on it, it's like those people are seeing different things and trying to prove to each other who is right in reality. Suddenly, the door opens. She didn't notice it at first, but as soon as footsteps start coming in her direction and she hears it, her eyes pop open. And then this man starts to say that he has a little conversation with her. At first, she thought that it can't be, and even almost fainted. Just now, she thought she was afraid to even look at him. And now he's literally right in front of her, and he came unannounced. He looks as if he's waiting for her to say something, and it scares her more and more. The very thing she was so afraid of and didn't want to happen has happened. Marquess Didytrian. Earlier, she was afraid to even think about him, but now she is in a little trap, where she will have to confess everything. The guy will not leave until he gets the answers to his questions. It turns out the three of them are in this room, and there's a painting next to it that he can take away at any time. It's very interesting why he decided to talk, because he could have just done nothing and left her there. Apparently, he's not as cold as people think he is, and he still cares about the model's opinion. The girl offers the option that she will keep the painting and the money for it will be gradually paid. She will give all her salary just to keep it. The thing is, in all this time, he's never opened the painting and looked at the result. And now is the moment to see what she's trying so hard to hide. The guy did it without her permission and thought he was definitely entitled to it. The picture was covered with a white cloth, and in a few seconds, everyone would see everything. At the very moment when the cloth was gradually slipping off the picture, her heart pressed so hard that she almost fainted. Surprisingly, the girl couldn't even think that he didn't take the painting with him then and left it in this manner. If the lady just knew about it before, she would definitely destroy it, or at least try to ruin it. What was her surprise that in the very room in which she had just recently been sad and wondering how to take the painting, this work of art was literally a few meters away from her. The guy said the thing is that the artist brought it in the next day as they had already made the deal. He doesn't think it's really fair, as he heard that the model was not happy with something, since it was a breach of their contract, even though he, as the buyer, should not care about the model and artist disputes. Something tells me that he should consider each of them and act so cruelly. And that's not even the most interesting part. The whole time he was talking about the model, the girl was sure he already knew that she was the model who was helping the painter. But at this point, in the middle of the conversation, the guy reminded her that she had arranged to talk to the girl from that painting and didn't understand what she had to do with it. It's unclear to him why she, a regular teacher, would even be having this conversation and why she would care. Which means that when he walked into this room, he didn't come to see her specifically. but just for the painting, and still didn't recognize her. Everything is very simple. Then in the workshop, the gentleman was in his carriage all the time, and the girl's face was seen only by his assistant. Now it is clear why he did not recognize her, and everything fell into place. Loides only found out one thing. This man is not going to give up the painting. He just wants to find a compromise and persuade the girl to model. In short, the biggest problem is that this painting will not be seen by the lady and all the other people who know her. If she only had a guarantee that no one will see the painting except him, she would be much more relaxed. She had no choice but to confess and tell the truth. She did it very quickly and didn't even feel nervous. He finds out that she is the girl who is depicted in the painting. Only thing is, how has she not yet realized that after the conversation and the way he looked at her face for a long time, even the customer did not recognize that it was her who was depicted in the painting? This is the proof that she has nothing to worry about. Moreover, he even asked why he should believe her and how she can prove it. From this point on, she shouldn't have any claims and fears at all. You can just break up and not continue this conversation. The guy actually demanded hard evidence that there was no reason for her to cheat on him. The customer heard that the model did not want to reveal her identity. So for him, it is strange that when meeting some girl so easily admits that she tried to hide all this time. Now you're gonna have to think very hard to make sure he doesn't have any doubts. But the problem is, there's only one way that works, and she's not gonna go for it. She had the idea of appearing in front of him in the same form as in the picture, but for that she would have to go beyond her principles, so he would have no doubts, and everything would be solved much easier. She didn't even bother to ask him. She just started taking off her clothes and remembering the exact angle she was in front of the artist. It's a very similar room here, and her hair is about the same as it was back then. From the looks of it, she won't even be afraid and will do it. Of course, you don't have to get rid of your clothes completely. Just show your back and turn to face him a bit. Loides asked him to look at her more closely so there would be no question later, showing her this for the first and last time. To make it look even more like the original picture, she took off her outerwear completely and turned her back. But even that wasn't enough for him. He says the pose is not at all like the one he sees in front of him in the painting. She'll have to do it exactly like the picture. He thought that the girl would definitely not refuse. After all, it was in her interest and she would hardly resist. After all, you could just do everything in a matter of seconds. Mentally, she thought to herself, hang in there, don't give up anyway. This was just a temporary embarrassment that would soon be over. I had to let my hair down, take all the excess out of it, and hold it up with my left hand to make it look exactly alike. And he, in turn, enjoys watching her and pretends it's just to make him believe her words. Even though it was already clear from the first time that it was her, the lady becomes very worried and afraid that he will approach her at the most unexpected moment. She listens carefully to his footsteps, but so far nothing of the sort has been heard. He is still standing where he was, and she had to even perfectly redo the same angle and turn in his direction, peering slightly like an artist. You can see very well how he looks at it not at all to find the differences. He rather starts to admire it and deliberately stalls for time. When a few minutes had passed and he'd seen everything he wanted to see. So I let him get dressed. And of course she did it with such speed as if she had frozen hard. This torment was over. Now she could turn to face him. This time lasted very slowly for her. It was as if she suffered every second and longed to put everything back on. In the meantime, he comes up and says that he will take the money for the painting back anyway. He also said it as if he was interested in something else and money can't solve the problem. He also suggested skipping this unnecessary conversation and not wasting anyone's time. As he is not going to refuse his order, he has his head straight that he needs the painting, especially since no one will return the money to him. They need to figure out a way to make her not be mad at him and give him what's already his. Suddenly, she proposes to redo the picture in such a way that everyone is satisfied. Since it is important for him to see her head and for her not to see her face, it is possible to draw in such a way that she completely turns away, and that's it. The only thing left to find out is whether he is satisfied with this option. And not thinking long, the guy warns that if she succeeds in doing it and talks the artist into a new painting, he will give her the first one and take the new one with him, but only if he likes it. Fortunately, the artist draws very quickly. He is a true professional of his work, and it would seem that there is nothing more to discuss, but the guy wanted to ask for something in return. He had one very important condition, without which nothing would work. Loides asked in a trembling voice what he wanted. And he said he'd like to watch the work in progress, and that would be his one and only requirement. It turns out that from the outside, it looks as if he liked her very much, and thus he just wants to look at her without clothes one more time. The girl was thinking about it so much that she didn't even notice how she forgot about the student during the lesson. She had to shout really loudly to get the girl to notice her, and it took her only the third time to do it. It turns out that the girl told me that she suddenly decided to learn to draw. The drawing teacher will come and will teach from next week. She cannot wait for it and very much want to meet her. Of course, the girl was very happy. It was the first time she heard that a student wanted to learn something and no one pushed or forced her to do it. That's a great achievement. And also, the main reason why she decided to do this business. She likes Marquis Tyrant very much. She has a dream to meet him and sell at least one of her paintings. Everyone knows that he likes to buy different masterpieces, and her dream is to have her painting at his house in a prominent place. Loides was surprised, but of course there was nothing she could say besides praise. The girl decided to let her personal affairs with him have no effect on the child's dream. And as soon as she thought about it, the girl started asking if she knew the man. She wondered what he was like up close, how much of a nice person he was, and in general, to find out any information at all. It's not surprising, but so far the girl is not ready to say anything about him. She doesn't want to think about him at all during her working hours, so she had to say that she didn't see him much. She just passed by and didn't notice anything special. And after that, suggested that we finish the class after all. Time was running out, and it was time to think about homework. Because the girl is too much into her drawing, she no longer wants to study ordinary subjects. It has become too boring for her. A few days ago, she was making amazing progress, but now her thoughts are only about drawing. The teacher began to worry about what to say to the mistress, since it was not her fault that the girl had new interests. If it was just an ordinary day, the teacher would try to do something about it. But her own thoughts are completely different. After that look from the Marquis, she's afraid he's up to something. He didn't just want to watch her paint. He's hardly interested in watching a painter paint. He's obviously interested in watching her during the process. She remembers very well the look in which unknown intentions lurk. It remains to be seen what will happen after he gets his picture and whether or not he will continue the communication. It's as if he doesn't plan to forget her. This man is too interested, but we still need to find out what exactly. That's what the girl is afraid of. At one point, the girl distracted her, though she asked an almost similar question. She asked if the teacher knew about the rumors that had been going around for years now. She says that everyone already knows how much that guy loves art, but few know that it's not all he's into. In fact, he collects something. The girl couldn't even say it in her voice. She had to whisper it in her ear so no one would hear it. Loides heard this, and for a few minutes she couldn't even say anything. She was so shocked she didn't even know how to react to it. Meanwhile, the guy had set aside a special room for them in his mansion, with much better materials and space than there in his studio. He had specially bought the best and most expensive brushes. They've already walked into this room and started admiring the soft brushes, the very good paint. These colors are so beautiful that he's already imagining what kind of masterpiece the end result will be. It will be a pleasure for the artist. He already loves his work, but now he will love it even more. He can't believe that he works in such a place. But unlike him, the girl doesn't even think about it. She just looks out the window at the mountains and wide plains. Any person you can see here are all the aides of the Marquis. They do their job very well and sometimes even give up their days off, because it is very pleasant to work here. There are few people who are not satisfied with something here. Many who want to work as assistants dream of getting here. But unfortunately, all the places are already taken. Each of the staff has been working here for more than 5 and some even more than 10 years. But despite all this, there is something terrible in the house. Few people know. But in the basement of this house is the biggest secret that makes you shiver in the body. There's a hidden room somewhere in here that holds the dead in such a way you can't tell they're dead. And that's not all. All these people are very similar to each other. They were young, beautiful girls, and the fact that he asked them to come to his house and even created a special room for the artist perhaps says that they are in a real trap, and Lydius is at risk of becoming one of those who will remain in that basement. Initially, she didn't believe the rumors at all, and thought that it couldn't be, because sooner or later, the police would have checked that basement. But nothing like that happened, especially if it were true. It's unlikely the guy would have let anyone know about that basement at all but him. He would have made a secret entrance impossible for the average person to see. It would have been something hidden, with hundreds of locks. And not only that, she tries to reassure herself that nothing's going to happen. It's okay. They'll just paint a picture and go home quietly. I'll just have to check why he needs to watch the process of work, because he needs the painting itself, and it doesn't matter how it's going to be created. The Marquis comes in and says that he has warned all the assistants not to come into this room so that no one and nothing can interfere with them. He's too serious and looking forward to the most interesting things. In fact, the artist doesn't care whether someone comes in or not. It's more important to the guy that no one distracts him and he can enjoy the moment as much as possible. The guy asked if they needed anything else for work, and the man said that this was enough. There was much more than he expected. It would be a pleasure to work with these tools. It's more than enough. He already enjoys just looking at all those beautiful paints and brushes. She never thought he'd have the opportunity to work under such conditions before. If he didn't owe any money, he would probably agree to work even for free. He promised to paint a real masterpiece. After everything had already been decided with the artist, he looked at Loidace and asked how she was going to model in those clothes. The man answered in her place and said that of course everything would happen this way and that. As it should, you don't have to worry about that. Immediately afterward, the painter ordered her to take off her clothes in a voice like never before. This time he was too rough, and she was very unpleasant to listen to him. It was so unpleasant that even the Marquis noticed the unpleasant voice. He did not think that they were communicating with each other in this way, for he was sure that such work gave pleasure not only to the artist, but also to her. As soon as she began to take off her clothes, the gentleman asked her to stop and asked the artist if he always treated her that way and made her do it that way. He immediately became very uncomfortable. He apologized to each of them, but it didn't work. The guy was very unhappy and told me that he had heard that artists have a sensitive nature, but his behavior was crossing all boundaries. The girl certainly did not expect such a thing from him. On the one hand, she is very pleased, but on the other hand, she is not clear whether to thank for it or better to keep silent. After everyone was ready to work, the Marquis went to the couch where he would be comfortable to watch the process, because it is not a quick matter. He even asked me to get him some kind of drink so he wouldn't be too bored and could relax even more. In fact, the girl is really hoping that he will quickly get bored of her sitting still in one place and doing nothing. Maybe he will quickly leave and not embarrass her. At one point, the artist asked her to raise her right elbow up a little. He thought it would be prettier that way, and she did so. The pose was very risky, that fabric that was slightly covering her body, just a little more, and it was as if it would fly off at any moment. She was very much afraid of it, but luckily she sits with her back to them and can fix it at any moment. Marquis doesn't stop looking at her. He doesn't even look away, trying to imagine what's behind her back and what kind of figure she has in the front. At some point, he had an idea. Why not make her turn sharply in his direction and forget to cover herself? That way the fabric would be sure to come off, and he'd see everything he wanted to see. At a moment when no one was looking at him, he broke his glass on purpose, and of course, everyone immediately turned in his direction. They wanted to see what had happened. Even though nothing had happened, you could ignore it. The shards would be cleaned up by someone else anyway. The painter stopped his work. He ran up to him to ask if everything was all right, as if he really cared about it. Unlike the man, the Marquis didn't even blink. It was very clear that it was done on purpose, and it was strange that no one noticed it. In order for the gentleman to take it easy and not have to leave the room, the artist went to call someone from the staff and left them alone. At first glance, one gets the idea that perhaps they had a prior arrangement, and it was all planned in advance. The girl felt incredibly awkward. The first thought she had was, just so he wouldn't take advantage of the situation, lock himself in this room with her and start getting closer. Even though he had already gotten a good look at her body from head to toe, it was still very uncomfortable to stay with him. She tries to turn in his direction to see what he's doing, even though she realizes that any glance in his direction, he might provoke the very thing she's just been dreading. She didn't manage to do it discreetly. The guy saw everything and almost asked what's wrong. It's obvious that he's trying to hold back, and it's unclear how much patience he can have. The only thing she can hope for is that the painter returns soon, and they spend as little time alone as possible. He had such a hard stare that she even began to imagine what he could do to her right here while no one else was around. There's really nothing stopping him from locking himself in a room with her in his own house. And he doesn't even have to explain anything to anyone. It's just his desire. If it weren't for the information the student told her yesterday, it wouldn't be so terrible and horrible because that's all she thinks about. She even felt like crying from the hopelessness of it all. There's no one to protect her here, and she doesn't even have the strength to fight back. The moment she started to hear some sounds, she thought he was approaching and began to imagine what he was going to do and what she could expect from him. She imagined him touching her with his finger, running it down her back and trying to send shivers down her body, and then gradually pulls off that white cloth to see all that is behind it, and all very slowly to delay the time and enjoy the moment to the fullest. Her eyes were closed the whole time. She imagined it so vividly that she couldn't tell if it was real or not. She felt his touch, and in her mind she didn't mind where things were going. Suddenly the painter comes in and apologizes that he couldn't find a maid for a long time, and they at least someone who could clean up those shards. Her eyes open, and the girl realizes that nothing happened, and she doesn't even know if she's happy about it or not. She has too many mixed feelings. And at this very moment, the guy gets up from the couch and suggests that we finish for today, as if he has no free time and everything can be done tomorrow. The man asked how it was that he had just immersed himself in the process and could not enjoy his work. He could paint for a long time and stay until the end of the day, just to finish what he had already started. Really, the two of them can just stay here and he can go wherever he wants. It's even better for the model. That's what she wanted in the beginning. They finally agreed to reschedule it for the next day, and when they came out of that room, they saw that there was really no one around. Just like he said, it was as if everyone had left the house and there was no telling when they would return. The artist assumed that the gentleman was not deceived. There was no one in the house except the three of them. On the one hand, it was very suspicious, especially after the words of the apprentice. But on the other hand, perhaps everything was simply exaggerated, and there was nothing wrong with that. And surprisingly, it's not the girl who gets nervous. It's the man. He thought it was too weird. He doesn't like the way the situation with that glass happened. He didn't leave any helpers behind just in case, and maybe it's all done on purpose. It's just not clear exactly what it's for and what he's trying to accomplish with it. Of course, you'd think he likes silence too much, and that's why he asked everyone to leave, but it's hard to believe that. In any case, accidental or not, it had no effect on his work. The guy was quietly observing as promised, and so far, it's too early, and there's no point in being nervous or afraid of anything. At some point, the artist started walking very fast somewhere, and the model stopped. It was as if she was attracted by someone's energy. She looked up and saw the owner of this house. And just a second later, the man yells very loudly and asks her to hurry up. It's like he wanted to show her something, or maybe he just wanted to go home quickly. After talking to that man, she has the impression as if his attention takes on a negative coloring. She feels that he is up to something, and didn't just ask to come to his house for nothing. Some time had already passed since then. The Marquis was constantly watching their work and interfering under the pretext that she was supposedly doing something wrong. And also, for some reason, he keeps breaking different objects. Even the artist realized that this is done on purpose. But what is the point of it? It is not clear yet. Everything is somehow too suspicious, and every day more and more and more. The model even asks the artist to finish the work as early as possible and hurry up, and explains that something is very much on her mind. She wants to get away from here as soon as possible. When it first started, she was pretty sure it wouldn't take her more than a few days. But somehow it's all dragged on, and they've been here for almost a week now. Surprisingly, she did manage to go back for a while to see the student and see how she was doing. The girl was very excited, and she went out to her and began to tell her all the things that had happened to her in the meantime. Also, today's a special day, it's her birthday, and of course the teacher couldn't miss it. Instead of fully enjoying the day, not thinking about anything and being happy like other people, she starts to think that everyone is talking about her, saying something bad, although it is probably far from being true. She's made herself believe that someone is discussing her life. Even though people have their own problems and don't have time for anyone else, she gets uncomfortable at the mere sight of someone looking in her direction. In order not to appear in the center of attention, she decided to go around, but suddenly, a little bumped into a guy. He managed to catch her, and thanks to this, the lady did not even fall down. She immediately apologized and didn't even have time to look at what this guy looked like. She had too many other things on her mind, but as soon as he asked if by any chance her name was Lydius, and after that she was finally afraid of what he would say next. He starts to say that he's been wanting to meet her for a long time, but it's never worked out. And finally it has. He apologized for not introducing himself right away and said his name was Camille Marcel, and she said she worked here as a teacher. It turns out the birthday girl Millie told him a lot about her. Now I can see why he recognized her and was very happy to see her. The girl thanked for such nice words and admitted that she was very pleased to hear it. With him, she even forgot about her problems for a minute and was surprised that it was possible. And as soon as he offered to communicate as if they had known each other for a long time, Lydeus immediately refused. She asked not to drop the formalities just yet and explained that it was just very important to her, and it would be difficult to talk to him as if he were a friend. Camille apologized if he offended her and said something wrong, then said he sometimes speaks faster than he thinks. It turns out that he actually wanted to ask her for advice on teaching methods, to which she replied that her teaching repertoire was nothing special, and she didn't even know what to recommend. The thing is, this is the first time he's giving lessons to young ladies, so he's trying to be as careful as possible, and it would be nice if she could still give some advice. And also, in case she wasn't comfortable telling him now, he offered to send her a letter if that would be more convenient. In the end, so be it, she agrees. As long as it's about the student, she doesn't spare anything for her. She has something to recommend, and in such a case, the guy even took a risk and asked for her address. Look at him carefully before telling him where she could be found. This man didn't seem bad, so the girl gave him the address, and wasn't even afraid to do so. In the meantime, a man arrives whom she recognized at once. He could be seen even from a distance. Other girls immediately appeared near him as usual. Even though he is surrounded by a lot of girls, he sometimes glances in the direction of the teacher who interests him the most. It's weird that he came here at all. He doesn't usually like being in crowded places, and he wouldn't do something he doesn't like just because it's someone's birthday. It has to make sense. And since this fellow is with her so far, she asked how well she knew the Marquis of Tyrant. He replied that he hardly knew him, and had not even conversed with him. He knows as much about him as other people, not more, although he was interested in his life before. But he never found out anything particularly interesting. Anyway, since he came to this holiday, this is the best gift for the girl. She dreamed of seeing him, and now she doesn't care about the other gifts anymore. The teacher said that the guy further did not realize how much she wanted to see him, and could not even imagine that it would happen on her birthday. I wonder who called him, because it is unlikely that the guy came himself and remembered the date. But whether it was true or whether the Marquis had come to celebrate her birthday, the girl doubted it very much, as did some of the other guests. He must have other important things to do, of which few people know, or rather no one at all but himself. Rumors began to circulate that the Baron might have offered him something. He's so excited and struggling to give his daughter to someone else. Suddenly she was dizzy, had some not-so-pleasant memories, and wanted to lie down for a few minutes. She apologized and said she needed to step away right away, or she'd pass out right here and now. The guy asked her to wait and she didn't even hear it. He still didn't understand what had happened. Though he wasn't really listening, he was much more interested in looking at the Marquis and getting to know him better. In the meantime, 3 days have passed. The teacher received some bad news. She was informed that the girl will not be able to study for some time due to ill health. They promised to contact her as soon as she is able to start studying again. I wonder what happened to her because no one mentioned a specific problem. It turns out that if she doesn't have classes, she won't get any money either, so she had to think about what to do with her finances next month. It's unlikely that they will be enough to cover what she has already earned in the past. Meanwhile, the girl noticed that the sister somehow felt bad and came trying not to look in her direction. She asked what was wrong, and the sister pretended as if she had imagined it. Literally after a second, she starts coughing and almost suffocates. It used to happen before, but very rarely. They thought that after the medicines she had already bought, it couldn't happen anymore. But it happens again. The girl is very frightened. She has no idea what to do. Her eyes start to darken and panic sets in. After that, she sees some red spots on her and realizes it's too serious. Something needs to be done about it immediately. The girl is mostly at work and doesn't have time to keep track of whether the medication has run out or not. She asked where it was, but the nurse said it had run out and there was nothing left. It's very bad because they don't even have money for food. Even though they tried to save money, it doesn't help them much. The problems come one by one. She doesn't make enough money to spend, and if it gets worse for her sister, she'll never forgive herself. After that, she just took all her remaining money and asked her sister to wait for her and promised to come back soon. There's only two options here. She's either gone to the pharmacy or the grocery store, and in the meantime, the girl is already here. She says hello to this man and tells him she has very little time. He was just thinking that she hasn't been seen lately, but she doesn't have time to explain anything. She just asked for the right medication and promised to tell him everything later. He understood and didn't waste her time. He asked her to breathe slowly to get her to calm down, because her rushing him wouldn't change anything. He tries to find everything she has asked for as quickly as possible, and in the meantime, she has seen in the paper some new drug that has been developed with a miraculous extraction rate. There is only a 2% chance that it will not help, and so far, by far, it is the best and newest that has no equal. The man told me that it is said to be very good in curing a similar disease, to the point of complete recovery, though it seems to be too much of a promising remedy. Since the opportunity arose, she asked where it could be found, but the man did not know where such things were sold, and it was unlikely that they could be brought to their village, and even if they were, the price would be 10 times higher than in the capital. This is not the best news, because just with money she is not very well. Everything as if on purpose does not go as desired. Every day there are more and more problems, and the previous ones are not solved. The man listened to her and suggested that since she was working for an aristocrat, if there were no complaints about her work, why not ask him for help, since it would hardly be appreciable for him to lose such a sum, and she needed it much more. In any case, sooner or later she will have to do it. She will not be able to earn as much as she needs to live. Her sister's condition is getting worse and worse, so you need to think about it in advance. The man believes that in such a situation, there is no point in thinking and worrying about anything. It is necessary to use any methods, even if she remains in huge debts. The main thing is that the sister recovered, and they will somehow deal with the rest. And he also advised to find someone to be there for the sister in case of an emergency and to give her the medicine in time. He asked if she had someone in mind and wondered how she hadn't thought of it before. In this case, the girl should have thought about it a long time ago and solved this problem, because she realizes that there is no telling what could happen if her sister becomes ill, and she will not be around at that moment. The girl said goodbye, thanking him for the medicine, and he asked her not to forget everything he had just advised her. He even felt as if it was his problem and not hers. From the outside, it looks as if she knows about her problems but is not going to do anything. She is afraid to ask someone for help and always relies on herself. Meanwhile, she is hurrying home, and at some point, she accidentally stumbles and falls on the floor. Of course, everyone looked in her direction and some even started laughing. She felt too awkward, and all those medicines she was holding in her hands scattered a few meters away. There are people walking around, and some people don't notice where they step on their feet. One of the medicines got spoiled, and as soon as she noticed it, she started begging for everyone to avoid the medicines. She can't hold back and starts crying a lot. She feels like the world is against her. She has to deal with it all on her own, and there's no help. The girl even forgot if there was a moment in her life when she was happy and did not think about where to make money and how to save someone's life. There's probably some way, but she doesn't even know about it, the whole problem. And then she wants to handle everything on her own and doesn't want to stress and burden someone with her problems. In the end, she packed up what was left and went quietly home. It was getting dark outside, but she didn't even notice. Today had been too long a day. It had somehow been a mess since this morning. It had only gotten worse. She was used to having the feeling of really not wanting the next day to come around. Because it is already clear in advance that nothing will change, there will only be more problems, less money, and probably something else will appear. The only place she has to go in this situation is church. It makes her feel a little better and calmer. It so happens that in all her life there has never been a single time when her prayers have been answered. She comes here only from desperate situations and hopes for nothing. She was born with nothing from the very beginning, in absolute poverty, and too was able to go to school and already used to cope completely alone. She didn't even have time and energy to notice that her life was filled with nothing but problems. And after her parents died, things only got worse. There were times when she faced horrible things while working as a teacher. In this life, she could only rely on her sister. It's the only person who could support her. If it wasn't for a serious illness, if she doesn't have her, the girl won't be able to bear it. At the moment when she had finally given up and started to cry, a man comes in. She turns around and sees the Marquess. He decided to give unexpected advice. Supposedly, you should not count on help here. He reads that only the person himself is able to change something. There is no other option. And then, he said a very interesting line that if she had something to ask for, she could do it a little differently, hinting that he had shown up here for a reason. It all adds up that he decided to help her, even though he doesn't know what her problems are. It's a very strange situation. He's never been here at this time before, And it's strange that he came here at all, if he doesn't believe that this place can help someone. When she started to keep quiet and decided to handle things on her own, the guy just silently walked away and wished her well. The lady gave in and admitted she needed money. A lot of money. Right after that, she felt very ashamed. She really didn't want to say it, but since he was leaving, she decided to admit it briefly and very quickly. After that, she wanted to apologize for her words, which were too rash. The girl says that if he allows her to work on other paintings, that will be enough. In that case, he could indeed offer some extra work, but warned that it would not be easy. In return, he would repay generously to cover all her financial problems once and for all. It was exactly what she had dreamed of hearing most of all. And now she couldn't believe it and thought she'd just heard it because it sounded like a miracle. He asked her to take some handkerchief and return it along with the answer to his proposal. It turns out he even gave her time to think and didn't rush her. Very interesting what he meant by extra work. But in any case, you should not refuse. It is better to try, because at any time you can refuse. It is a great opportunity to get a lot of money. She couldn't even think that someone could have so much money. The girl knew he was a very rich man, but she didn't think that much. Each time her life becomes less and less predictable, it's hard to imagine what awaits her even a few hours from now. The next day came, and of course she had been in his office since morning, the girl returning the handkerchief he had lent her. And as for his job offer, she'd want to get some details straight first, so there wouldn't be any unpleasant surprises later on. To which he replies that he will only give details after she gives her final decision. She won't know anything in advance. She faces a very difficult and tempting choice. She has questions about how dangerous it is, how she could be of use to him, and what she owes him for such help. It is unlikely that he would help with such a huge amount in return for something ordinary that any other helper could help him with. In that case, she says she is ready and accepts all the conditions, although she has no idea what awaits her. The guy says that a man will be waiting for her outside. He will explain everything and then prepare the contract. Lastly, he just said that he hopes for a successful cooperation. Meanwhile, she's already opening this contract and sees the first and only condition. She has to live with him and she can't have another private room of her own. The assistant asked her not to worry. After all, she just had to be near him and there would be no more additional conditions. He was only interested in her presence, nothing else. To put her at ease, he says that nothing dangerous awaits her. And since she has already given her consent, it is too late to refuse. The Marquess will not accept any refusal anyway. The girl did not ask other questions. She just calmly agreed, because she realizes that she has no other option. Even if she did not like something, she would still agree. What conditions you were not there? The fact was that when the boy first saw that picture, his eyes were enchanted. He wanted to look at her forever, though it was very evident that her posture betrayed the remnants of the awkwardness and shyness she was trying to hide from the hopelessness of the situation.